Don't learn the language of Concordia. This language is not a virulent new strain of Gen Alpha slang, but something worse, believe it or not. And I don't know who created Concordia, but it's more than symbols and sounds. It's a language from some other world. Trying to pronounce its native name would leave both your throat and mind sore. It would invite something dark inside. Amongst English speakers, the language has no fixed name. Most commonly I've seen Concordia. I've also seen Apex and the language of peace. But I call it Palx. That name came to my mind from nowhere, like some parasitic horror. Made me hot and clammy. But the nightmare, I would learn, had only just begun. Palx. From the very first time the sound slid off my tongue, I hated it. Hated that it had such a wonderful mouthfeel. Sweet and milky. I never knew a word could taste of anything. Every time I utter that name, or even think it, something triggers my tongue's receptors, leaves a lingering flavour of euphoria in my mouth. The promise of nothing ever being bad again. Palx seeks, then spreads from platform to platform. Morphs into a new name and a new taste for each individual. As there is no word which accurately represents the glyph. This is by design. It does whatever it must to avoid detection, whatever it must to infect more minds, until we all speak Palx. But you don't even need to know its name. You'll know its face when you see it. The selling point is always the same. Learn this language, and know peace for the rest of your life. That is a lie. There is something intoxicating about that idea of the world before the Tower of Babel. A single language. No danger of misunderstanding one another ever again. Palx presents itself as a cure for war, poverty, and even civilization's stagnation. But it isn't that. It affects the mind in ways I still don't understand. If you become fluent, you'll turn into something wretched, something far from peaceful. I'm aware that language has always determined the way we think. Your tongue is fastened to your brain, whether you like it or not. You see the world through your word stock, and that used to fascinate me. If French had been my native language, would I have become the same Wyatt? I did actually learn French when I was a teenager, but I just don't think a second language, learned after formative years, really shapes the mind in the same way. You see, when I speak French, I'm aware that I'm speaking French. I don't hear words, I hear sounds to translate. I'm sure multilingual children, exposed to many cultures from birth, have broader experiences, have a better idea of the way in which words shape a person's sense of self. But no language alters the mind like Palx. I suppose I should tell you how I fit into all of this. In August, I downloaded TikTok. I didn't really want to do so. Something drove me to do it. Something other than a hunger for AI-voiced Reddit stories and cringeworthy sketches. It was the voice. The same horrid voice which filled my mind with the word Palx moments before a 20-second clip appeared on my screen. The TikTok depicted an ethereal woman sitting cross-legged in a dandelion field. A white shawl encompassed most of her body, and a whiter smile encompassed most of her face. Her long blonde hair was bound by a tight band of freshly picked flowers from her surroundings. "1 month ago, I was an investment banker," she softly said, flicking a golden strand out of one eye. "Today, I have only one job, to spread words that will heal the world. This language is Apex, and one day, when we all speak it, we will never need our old words again. Rotten words of hatred and greed. We will unite. And then the woman started grunting gutturally. She offered a definition for each word. Those low, monstrous sounds cut deeply into my mind. Not words as endearing as Palx. They tasted sour. Each fresh one stung my grey matter and worsened the burgeoning rage beneath the surface of my mind. Yet I did not stop watching, did not stop listening. It was only after I summoned the courage to thumb the screen that I woke from the trance. Now, anyone else might have dismissed that woman's language lesson as an odd video from an odd TikToker, but I wasn't so quick to push my feelings aside. I promptly deleted the app and found myself praying never to hear a word of those ancient, inhuman noises again. Of course, I would not be so fortunate. Palx found me in the real world. It always finds its students. I dreamt of sounds and symbols, dreamt of translations. And again, I'm sure some people would have dismissed the nightmares as nonsense. Symptoms of an overstimulated brain, perhaps. But I knew better. And there was no denying the terror I experienced during my waking hours. After 2 or 3 weeks of bad dreams, those foreign symbols started to appear in the real world. Glyphs had been etched into bus stop adverts, my company desk, and even my apartment's front door, which caused hostility between my flatmate and me. He didn't believe that I had nothing to do with it, but at least that proved the horrible truth. I hadn't gone insane. This was all real. A virus within my mind was teaching me the otherworldly language. But I did not feel enlightened like the spiritual TikToker. I felt threatened, frightened. From the very beginning I sensed that Palx did not intend to bring peace. "Are you okay, Wyatt?" my co-worker, Bradley, asked as he entered my office cubicle. I looked up and tried to focus my eyes, my sleep-deprived eyes. "I'm fine." "You sure don't look it," my co-worker said. "Thanks," I replied. Bradley sighed. "You're still thinking about that video, aren't you?" "I don't want to talk about it," I pleaded. "It's just a strange online trend, Wyatt," my friend said. "It's not a real language." "I don't want to talk about it," I repeated. "Sorry," he replied. "Anyway, have you spoken to the man?" I frowned. "The man?" Bradley nodded. "The one who asked for you at the front desk. Didn't Lynn call you?" I shrugged. "Doesn't seem that way." "Ah," my friend replied. "Well, someone wants to see you." "Does this someone have a name?" I asked. Bradley shook his head. "Nope. He gave Lynn and me the creeps. I was just down there with her, and she said she'd give you a quick call." I rubbed my eyes sleepily. "When was this?" About 10 minutes ago," he said. "I told her that I didn't mind relaying the message to you. I would have come straight to your cubicle, but there were a few emails I needed to send first. Sorry." "Lynn probably just got distracted," I replied. "I'll head down now." "I'll come with you," Bradley said, as he followed me out of the cubicle. "You really don't have to do that," I said. "I'm still wondering who'd even be here to see me." My friend shook his head. "That's exactly why I'm coming with you. I didn't like that man's vibe, Wyatt. Besides, Bill's not here yet. Let me waste a little of the morning, won't you?" I smiled and nodded as we entered the lift. Then I buzzed the G button. But when we stepped out into the lobby, 30 seconds later, I immediately felt out of place. Immediately felt isolated, even with Bradley's company. It wasn't just the strange man standing in the centre of the deserted room. Wasn't even Lynn's absence behind the reception desk. It was the silence. A silence too weighty to be natural. That blanket of nothingness buried dark noises beneath. The buzzing grunt of words from a language that shouldn't exist. They were always there, you see. Words being murmured at the back of my mind. "Hello, Mr. Wyatt Lewis," said the stranger coldly. He was an unassuming figure, 5'6" with a beige bomber jacket, faded jeans, and polished shoes. The visitor had the appearance of a man younger than his years, but his smooth, rosy-cheeked complexion was a false one. That good health was an illusion. "How may I help you?" I asked, assuming the stranger to be a client I'd slighted somehow. "By letting me fill in the gaps," he answered. "By completing yourself." I paused. "I beg your pardon?" "You're nearly there, Wyatt," the man softly said. "After all, you know that the closing words of the sentence were alien sounds, which caused Bradley to scream in pain, caused his knees to buckle and slam into the floor.
"What does it mean? What does it mean?"
my friend cried. I didn't quite understand the words either, but I was close, closer than Bradley, fluent enough to remain on my feet, to not be left in a state of agony. My kneeling friend and I locked eyes, sharing the same petrified expression. Bradley's ear canals were dribbling lines of blood, but I didn't do a thing to help him. I watched in frozen terror, and the stranger smiled. "It's not for you, Bradley. You don't have the capacity for peace. You don't fit." Then this man, neither young nor old, scurried towards us, on feet that, when hitting the tiles, barely produced noises. I felt unable to intervene as the stranger seized my friend's throat and continued to speak words which very nearly made sense, which tasted sweeter by the second. "Wait!" Bradley choked, eyes wide as if he'd finally comprehended something. "Sir, I hear what you're saying. Please." I heard it too. A beastly voice which spoke of things that I'm too afraid to put in writing. Most horrifyingly, the stranger's lips weren't moving. It wasn't him. It was something else. Something nearby. That voice, which I thought must only live in the back of my head, but everyone heard it. It spoke of things which sounded so lovely and tranquil, yet blinkered and inflexible. A language that was willing to hammer triangles and squares into round holes, but not pentagons like Bradley. Some shapes would never fit. And I felt the haunting beginnings of a smile on my lips. Only haunting in retrospect, however. At the time, I was starting to feel content. I was nearly swayed to do whatever it would take to bring peace and quiet. Failing that, just quiet. Eternal quiet. "I want it too," Bradley weakly spluttered, throat constricted. "Please, this isn't the way. Hurting me is..." "You don't Fit, the stranger calmly reiterated, before shushing my screaming friend. Shh. You don't fit. And then the man, much to my surprise, released Bradley's neck. The blood stopped trickling from my co-worker's ears, and his screaming stopped. All sounds stopped. I wondered whether it had finally happened. Whether Palx's utopian existence had been achieved. But the stranger started to smile in a disingenuous manner. And he uttered, in a near whisper, one final grunt of the foreign language that I was so close to speaking fluently. I didn't understand the Palx word, but my friend moaned in response, as if he were able to translate, as if he were comforted by whatever the man had said. Bradley, I began. I didn't finish the sentence. My kneeling companion's skeleton fell into itself, like copper in a metal baler, and he opened his mouth to screech, but nothing came out of Bradley's deformed throat, deformed lungs, deformed body. He survived for 2 seconds of what must have been unimaginable pain. Then he lay still. He didn't look like Bradley. Didn't look like anything human at all. Just a revolting heap of clothes and guts. Whilst I vomited and intermittently screamed, the horrid stranger asked, "Are you ready for your final lesson, Wyatt Lewis?" I eyed the man's deceptively young face as he opened his mouth to speak words that would, undoubtedly, have completed my transition, would have turned me into some mad thing like him. But I chose to act on an impulse of animalistic fear. I launched towards the stranger and pushed him forwards, before watching his head clunk against the corner of the lobby's front desk. I was too detached to process the twitching body of the man I'd injured. My eyes instead caught something I'd missed when Bradley and I entered the room. A bloody smear across the reception counter. Once I'd inched towards the ominous stain, a second stream of vomit escaped from my lips. I was finally able to peek over the desk, and there she lay, the body of Lynn Kerry. She rested, much like Bradley, in a clump of undignified gore beside her blood-covered chair. Neither of them looked human. Neither of them looked like corpses. They'd been rendered nothing by a force I did not and could not comprehend. The stranger, convulsing on the floor, started to slow. Then he lay very still, and I was gripped by a fresh horror. That of the man being dead. That of me being a murderer. However, there was a greater horror that I had failed to consider. One proven true when the man's eyes shot open. The horror of the man still being alive. I screamed until my vocal cords cracked explosively, as if trying to release gravelly Palx words. And then I sprinted towards the front doors, exited the building and didn't look back. Since that day, I've been living in a tent, far from anything and anyone. I've only dared to visit the nearest village, for food, water, and to send this message in a last-ditch attempt at salvation. Do you know how to save me? Is anywhere far enough? Can I outrun this language? I fear not. I woke in the dark hours of this morning to find a bloody symbol carved into my forearm.